Still, in the general area of which we were surveying, regarding the fact that it would be only a revolutionist, a new revolutionist, who would really want to know where he was. And to pick up where the teaser was, for those of you who were teased Friday, on the basis of that, a new revolutionist would know that where you are depends on where you think you are. And where you think you are depends upon whether you are thinking collectively based or whether you are thinking independently and individually. And to stall it off even further, I guess we're going to have to take this opportunity to point out that even though under ordinary conditions, what I just referred to, what I just phrased as independent, individual thought would be, let's don't exaggerate. How about impossible? Under all ordinary finite conditions, to think independently would be impossible. You would be in the same boat with the tongues, deciding to have a good laugh at that kind of collective similarity of all stomachs. To believe that you are thinking under ordinary conditions in any way independently, individually, is just another hobby. For those of you that are a little more up to date, instead of the savings that you could have of collecting electric trains, it could be, by now, I assume, slot cars. But you would still be saving your time and money to not worry about trying to figure out, am I thinking independently? Am I thinking individually? Because if you're having to ask that, the answer is, you guess. But the fact is, there has to be, as always, some reality to this, even speaking, let's call it theoretical, since it's Monday. And I know a lot of you have a hard time getting going. Sometimes long about Friday, it seems like things pick up. So let's just say that we are just waxing philosophically and theoretically, that if the human mind can think of something, then there is some reality to it, that it is some sort of finite reflection of something. So the idea of independent thought, individual thought, as opposed to what we've been calling the collectively based thought, which is the Garden of Eden, it is the genesis, it is the mother and father of all of our nervous systems. Under ordinary conditions, any sort of dream that I am not influenced, and pick out any subject, any part of your brain that would say, well, wait a minute, there's at least one area in which I can be independent, free, objective, etc. Then if you listen to that part of the brain and take it any more seriously than the kind that says, I want to choo-choo, or, got to go to the wee-wee or something. If you take that part of your brain as being any more serious than the other part, then you and that part of your brain deserve each other. But under ordinary conditions it's not possible, but back to the fact that if the human brain can think about it, if life seeping through the human nervous system has people think about it, then it is a reflection of something. So, back to our Monday theoretical waxing. Not your thighs, we're speaking more in a figurative sense. Especially those of you extremely hairy thighs, and he was going to be here tonight, but it would have to be independent thought as opposed to collectively based thought. It would definitely, we can narrow it down, it would certainly, independent thought would certainly not be, to begin with, whatever the collective is thinking. Obvious. But what is not very obvious, and what's impossible to calculate with a finite calculator, is that it would also not be the opposite of the collective, nor its rejection. Which, as always, would lead the ordinary brain going, all right, I followed up to them, but now what, smartass? And you can't tell the mind after that, under ordinary conditions, about what's after that, because it is absolutely by its own construction, having no choice, it is right up to the original poster child of a cul-de-sac. All I can do is say, well, all right, you say it's not chocolate and it's not vanilla, what the hell is it? And you can't do anything else with the mind at that basis. But how about push it just a little bit further, or sideways, that it would have to be, let's take it from just calling it thought to something a little wider. That it would, if there was something other than the 3D world, which again, the human nervous system has forever insisted, as soon as it could insist, as soon as it could talk, it insisted there's something more than this, which of course is always true. And then it gets into the childish, the cruder realms of, well, there's something other than this, and then it goes into all sorts of Baroque and Rococo dreams of other worlds, and all the way from Greek mythology to Oral Roberts trying to come up with another winning basketball team. And all the religious possibilities in between. But the idea that there is something else rather than it being another world, an afterlife, a sublife, a forgotten life, consider on the basis that, just for the sake of Monday waxing, that if there is something other than a 3D world, then let's take the same sort of parallel approach, those of you who are still there, that we were trying to get the mind to consider that if there is something other than collective thought, what would it be? All right, if there's something more than the 3D world in which all collective thought is limited, but another way, a 3D world in which the only thing possible is collectively based thought, then if there is anything other than a 3D world, look at it another way, it would certainly not be an anti-3D world. And it would certainly not be anything less than a 3D world, such as a 1 or 2 dimensional world, which is, if you can see it right quick, exactly, it is, the idea of less than a 3D world is what is really tantamount to what religious ideas are. Not that it's religion's fault, it's the same thing as the, looking at its 3 forces running everything, it is the kind of destructive force, is kind of the drawing back to the past of humanity, the belief that we have fallen. That is the idea, if you notice, of what heaven would be, a paradise, of a glorious past, which never was. But the idea of a glorious past, what are they dreaming of? Or a glorious future. It's the same thing at the 3D level. The idea that in someday, let's say the golden age of Greece, or as opposed, or the other hand, the heaven of the Christians, or paradise of the Muslims. In one sense, what are they describing? They're describing a world of less dimensions than exists now. Because it's always what? It's always shy of certain of the, quote, problems we now have. Well, heaven certainly would not be as dangerous a place as it is now in Pittsburgh. I just picked that out. It would not be a place wherein you must pay excessive taxes. It would be a place of all sorts of, they can't elaborate on reality. One more time, it's not religion's fault, it's the brain's fault. It's the brain's, it's the nature of the mind as it is. They cannot elaborate. The human nervous system cannot elaborate and say, well, this would be paradise, this would be an improvement by the addition of such and such. Now, they can even start out, I guess somebody could hear this and say, well, I can do that because heaven would be a place and I'll make an addition, but the addition is going to be a subtraction. For those of you who really enjoyed, which I noticed was just almost uncontrollable enthusiasm swept Friday, when it was pointed out that in a certain way 5 plus minus 3 does not equal 2. They can say, all right, here is paradise. It would be a place of additional attributes. What would they be? All right. For one thing, it'd be a place where we would have the addition of no crime. We would have the addition of people with no prejudice, no hostility, no hormones. The only thing that the mind can do under finite conditions, that is under ordinary conditions, is to consider progress being based upon subtraction. It has to be that if there is a world beyond the 3D, maybe I point out what some of you immediately swallowed that it could not be simply an anti-3D world. That'd just be simple annihilation. But then I tried to get you to consider it would also not be anything less. And some of you might have thought, well, that doesn't make sense, or else it's obvious, and it's not. That's in the same way, now to go back for a second, of trying to consider what it would be if in some way it was possible not to be thinking based upon collective thought. Ordinarily, when people dream of something, and not just dreams, it is the kind of offshoots of some of the hallucinogenic drugs, the kinds of things where the human brain, the nervous system, is literally, which is the only way it can be, literally, physically jogged into new connections. And people come back and they write. They've been writing for thousands of years. They've been writing right up until the psychedelic age and still are, and calling it mysticism and all sorts of things. And they try to talk about expanded consciousness. They try to talk about an expanded view. They try to say in some way my brain, the connections, have become more expansive. Have they? Is that what they're saying? The answer is no. What they're dreaming of, the only thing that comes out of that kind of experience is a dream of lesser dimensions. So, back to where we were. A neurorevolutionist knows that where you are, you remember we're still in the area that would, a neurorevolutionist is the only person who would really want to know where he is universally. Everyone else is made to be. That's what the collective thought is. Everyone else is made to be satisfied to be able to name their neighborhood and their religion, their culture, their nationality, their race, their sex, their height, their hobby, their profession. You know, something. Even if it's a guy laying in the gutter saying, I'm a no-good bum. You know, if we were the harsh sort, we'd say, sir, there you go. You're the same sort of egomaniac, always trying to tell people what kind of guy you are. I know I'm terrible. See, there you go again. See, that is not knowing where you are universally. Because if you knew, may I suggest, I should have saved it for a Kyroot, but if a person knew where they were universally, they got nothing to say to you. Not seriously, they don't have anything to say about, well, let me tell you what kind of guy I am. I mean, I guess they could say it in the same way they might spit, or think real hard and perhaps make a rude noise like that guy. Seemed like everyone was afraid to react to that. May I put it to you another way? You remember the Kyroot tonight that there was one guy that when he would think real hard would make rude noises. Can I put it to you another way? Every time you think real hard at the ordinary level, you make rude noises. You call that a rude noise? You don't? Well, I'll think about it later. All right. The ordinary mind does not want to know where it is in any kind of universal sense. And assuming I made up that sentence, I don't know. In other words, if nobody's ever said that sentence exactly, I could say that under many conditions to many people in many epochs throughout history, and many people would say, that's exactly what I want. That is why I've been taking these drugs. That's why I've been studying religious literature or trying to meditate. Is I do want to know where I'm universally. That is the whole idea of trying to understand more. I know. Life again makes everyone stand in line and also makes everyone dissatisfied to do so. So people say that, but you're back to the same condition that they will say that, but then what will they do? Not that they're dumb, they have no choice. They will do the very things to cut down on the expansion. Such as, the obvious one, nobody seemed to like it last time, so what the hell, we'll do it again. The obvious one, I'll expand my consciousness, give me some more of those drugs. No, we're certainly not here to knock drugs because that's a decent hobby. Sometimes, based upon the scarcity of some of the Lionel and electric flyers, drugs nowadays can probably be a cheaper hobby literally than collecting some of the electric trains. So I'm certainly not here to poke fun at drugs, but to imagine, well, I'll take drugs to expand my mind. Or I will sit here in a dark cave for 20 years and stare at my navel to expand my understanding. It sounds all right unless you're a revolutionist at all and you think about it for 2 or 3 seconds. Or yes, I want to expand my understanding. What I'll do is I'll go join this group of people who all stand up together and sit down together, sing a song together. I'll go join a collective group. Then I will expand myself individually by throwing myself in the midst of a herd of intellectual hippos, if not warthogs. I was trying to make you see something further removed for those of you that think, well, I'm not all that weird. I've never considered going off to a cave or trying to meditate or find some nut with a beard and a turban. Many people say, oh no, not me. I'll go join, they don't say this, I'll go join a large number of nuts who do not have a turban on. I mean, I'll join such a collective. We're not talking about just some small time group of nuts. I mean, how many Catholics, how many Jews, how many Muslims? We're talking about millions and millions, folks. And so you go get in the middle of them, who's going to come by and say, ha ha, look at there, 24 million nuts. Well, you can do that. You can go past the Catholic Church or any group. I'm just speaking religion. Germans, Italians, but you can point at them and say, boy, look at that, a bunch of nuts. I'm just sure that's going to ruin their day. See, that is part of the collective, part of the power, part of the stability of collective thought. Because one guy can come by, it does happen, but that's not being an individual thinker. There are plenty of people that ride by on a fast horse or a cheap bicycle and point at the Catholic Church or Muslims or anybody and laugh. In other words, they're going to be independent. I will be anti whatever it is. That is not independent thought. Not simply not rejecting collective thought. But they can go by and go, and certainly, shake the church to its very foundation. That's one reason there is the collective. So back to where we were. Again, yes. If there was such a thing as the possibility of of individual thought as opposed to collective, it would be that even though ordinary people say, I want to know where I am, at the ordinary level, just ask yourself, because we don't have to talk about any collective or organized group of religion or nationalities, just back to yourself. When you start trying to think, well, all right, where am I? How do I feel oriented in life? I'm not absolutely satisfied. I want to know more. I want to understand more, etc. But on what basis do you operate? There's only one, the collective basis. Well, let's see. I grew up being a Presbyterian. And I don't know, some of it just left me cold, and I drifted away from my religion, and I studied philosophy. I drank a lot of coffee in college. But now that I'm getting older and wiser, mainly older. Now that I'm getting older and wiser, mainly older. Now that I'm getting older and wiser, I don't know, I feel strangely drawn back to the church. You're getting old, motherfucker. I feel drawn back. I feel perhaps I was hasty in my youth. Back when you were horny and a little more excited. Remember, reality covered it for a guy only last Friday. The man who was unusually anxious. Remember? And the local reality kind of gave him a quick check and said, well, I can see your problem. A man your age, you got no business having a nervous system still that active and excited. It's exactly. And he doesn't, because normally you get past a certain age, middle age is normally called. You start getting past that age and you're not as likely to go out and attack. Not as likely to be drawn into extramarital affairs, as they used to be called, to be drawn here and there, to do silly, foolish things when your hormones are still on all fours. Now I'm getting a bit older. I have learned from my experience. I'm becoming wiser. You're getting older, I said. But a person, at any rate, back to where we were for the third time. A person can say, well, I feel now, for some reason, now that I've gone through these various stages of my life, I feel, I don't know, strangely drawn back. It's as though I hear my forefathers, my religion, my culture calling, come home, come home. And so a person can say, well, now I'll go back, I'll reinvestigate. Perhaps I will reassess my religion. What are they saying in regard to what I was just trying to get you to consider? That the ordinary mind has got no choice. It can start off and reject whatever the collective thought was in some area. But then if it gets older and decides. Even I like a good joke. And it realizes, hey, based upon all actuary tables, I am now, at my age, I am closer to death than I am being born. Perhaps Presbyterianism wasn't that big a shuck after all. Considering the possibility that I may die and go to Cleveland, maybe I ought to go back and talk to the rabbi, the priest. The ordinary mind has got no choice but to deal with some kind of collectively based source. Even if they say, well, I'll take a little bit of Presbyterianism, I'll mix it with a little bit of Jewish mysticism, now I'll mix it with a little bit of what it would be to be an Italian elk. Well, that used to be a nice organization before they opened it up to the public and put in bingo, but I don't want to get into that. The general thrust I was going to try to hit was for you people to consider, under any ordinary conditions, without looking at any religion or looking externally, under all ordinary conditions, what we're calling collective thought, what is the alternative? I don't mean theoretically. What can you literally do with your nervous system under ordinary conditions? And the answer is CTN. That's not a new network. That means close to nothing. Because all you can do is you try and take whatever the collective information, whatever you already had, and you can think to yourself, I will be creative, I'll be original, I am not, since I've already been through this, my religion, what I used to believe, my philosophy, my forefathers' philosophy was not satisfying. Had it been satisfying, I would have stayed there. That's why I've spent part of my life on this great search. But now it's time to gather our resources back together. You're getting old. It's time, I feel now, a bit wiser, a little older. It may be time to reevaluate. Perhaps I was a bit hasty in just rejecting out of hand what so many people have so long believed. Who was I to think that I could have been correct and the whole church wrong? You do see what's happening. Don't worry about you feel like Presbyterianism or something else is saying, come home. It's hormones going. And it's what time that they're still awake, they're now hearing dirt, freshly dug dirt. Out in a place where it's very quiet saying, come home, come home. And men begin to think, well, perhaps there's more to religion than I thought when I was 22. And of course they're saying, perhaps there's more to death than I used to think. To try and slip the pickle in now. Out of all that, do you realize what you have done and what all of humanity has done? Not that they're wrong. Not that they were misdirected. But all they can do is run, and if you want to consider a spiral to be a mechanical, an automatic improvement over a circle. That is a merry-go-round on a worm screw. But they still must go back to the collective thought. They either go back and reject collectively based belief and thinking, or else they imagine it being less than it is. As represented by the little thing that made some of you laugh, that I will expand my mind by taking drugs. I will increase my understanding by putting some alcohol in my system. Then, I don't know, it seems to clarify my thoughts. That's the same as saying, I mean, that's just a crude version. Because at least, as far as I know, Brother Jack Daniels never claimed any more for that fine liquid other than the fact that, hey, have a few drinks and be somebody. But he never said, drink this and you'll talk to the gods. Well, that's a dangerous thing to say in eastern Tennessee. But notice that is what the mind does by having dreams along all ordinary lines that are collectively based, whether it be religion, philosophy, religion still being the easy one, because what they're saying is my dreams of an improved life, which is an improved way to think, because they're not going to improve the primary life. I mean, you're not. You know that by now. Unless you're sick to begin with, such as, if you're going around and every morning you nail 10 pennies in your head, and you can say, well, I've now come to my senses and I quit doing that and I feel much better. We're not talking about that. We're talking about just ordinary, run-of-the-mill, sane people. You're not going to improve the primary taste of life if you're sane. The only possible improvement is in the secondary. And all ideas of religion, without drugs, but all ideas of religion, all ideas of even common humanistic rational sense, is what they're dreaming of is I'm going to take the secondary world as it is, the finiteness of it already, and if possible, I'm going to even make it more limited. That is the dream. Not analyzed that way, but that is the dream, that is the thrust of the ordinary mind trying to think individually. You understand? It's like, well, I'm sick of being in the closet here with all these other people. What I'll do is I'll retreat over to that corner over there and hold my breath and maybe pull myself up into a tight little ball, and then I will be an individual. And if anybody gets close to me, I'll say, screw you, or I'll stick out my tongue. Or if they're bigger than me, at least internally, I'll say, screw you. That is not independent thought. That is not individual thought. There's another way to try and put this that we've already touched on in another apparent area earlier, and that is that you could not truly know where you are unless you make it up. You remember that? You remember that good old Kyroot, the man that told the family, at least the children that seemed to understand anything, he told those kids, if you really, actually, truly know anything, it's something you made up. So how about this? The only way that anyone could know, which we're still talking about in your revolutionists, the only way that you could ever actually know where you are is you would have to make up where it is that you are. Do you want me to go back and play ordinary mind? Ordinary mind says this is getting, it's getting past the point of being silly. I don't even want to argue with you anymore. That's just ridiculous. How can you say that the only way you can know where you are is to make up where you are? All right, let's look at it another way. Humanity, as far as you know, have had a good 6,000 years in this part of the world to figure out where they are. What have they come up with? They continue, it gets bigger and bigger with every Rose Parade. The floats get bigger and bigger of this huge question mark. Larger, larger, more and more flowers on it. The balloons get bigger. It takes more people to walk down Fifth Avenue in the Macy's Parade to hold it. 6,000 years. It went from a little bitty question mark, we're talking about progress here, folks, to a gigantic, to an atomic-powered question mark. Now, that's the way life's supposed to be. But now, just between you and I, since you've only, I hate to be the one to tell you, but you only got 60 or 70 years here. I hate to say that. If you're going to wait around, the rest of them, we're talking about collective thinking now. The best minds of, not the century, the best minds of history. And we're talking about serious people here. Attorneys, philosophers, kings. They've had 6,000 years to come up with an answer of where are we? You got 60 years. Now, again, it's a decent hobby. You can read books. You can consider the great minds of the past. You can even fall for that one of, we can only stand on the shoulders of the giants who have gone before, as opposed to the Kyroots of, what am I doing standing on the shoulders of intellectual pygmies? From a certain view, although it belies three-dimensional reality, so what? A revolutionist could stand on a book of important information and suddenly realize my horizon has dropped. Did you follow? So everyone else says it's a great. In fact, if you're in the city, you should join in, especially if somebody else is buying. And they say, hey, let's hear it for the history of humanity. And we all are standing on the shoulders of the intellectual giants. Einstein would say, I only stand on the shoulders of Newton. Newton said, I stand on the shoulders of Galileo, etc. From another view, that's quite valid. A revolutionist, if he got so, let's say, perhaps he had a mini stroke, got temporarily befuddled, and he tried to pursue collective thought. And I was using the figurative picture of he stands on the collected works of Western philosophy, or Eastern philosophy, or Northern philosophy. But he stands there to stand on the shoulders of giants. That is, I will stand on the pillars of collective thought. The experience, the intellectual experience, which is the only thing we're talking about. The intellectual experience of humanity, I will stand on this history. If he suddenly came to his senses, you realize a neurorevolutionist has now stood on this, which would make sense in a three-dimensional world, except he would realize I have climbed up on the shoulders of something that made me smaller, which was my little twist on the old one of we stand, we light our lanterns from the fires of those who have gone before. That used to be it, and it was we stand on the shoulders of giants, which sounds great. But you can stand on the shoulders of giants, and so what? At that level, does your mind know any more if we're going to pick out one of the, let's say a first giant, just as a quick figure of speech, Aristotle. Are you going to say that you understand as much as Aristotle? Not that he understood anything, but if you got an ordinary mind, you're confronted with the volume of his work and what he wrote, you'd go, well, no, I don't want to be pretentious. But if you understood anything, you could stand on his collected works, you can stand on the collective shoulders of all the collective thinkers of history, and what's turned out is you're standing on the shoulders of pygmies. Not that they were wrong, but you haven't done anything to your intelligence if you're still dealing with collective-based thinking. So, back to the insanity of, if you actually, to even know where you are in a universal sense, not the collective sense of, well, I can tell you who I am, I can tell you the kind of guy I am if you'd like to hear me. Yeah, I'll be back in a minute. Now, I can tell you by God, I can tell you the history of my family. I've traced my roots. I can tell you the kind of religious person. I can tell you my philosophy. I can tell you the kind of sociological ideas I have. I can tell you my political insight. I'll be right back. Don't lose your place. I'll be right back. If I'm not, start without me. If you're going to know where you are beyond that, back to the insanity, I was suggesting to you that you'd have to make it up. And of course, then I spoke up for ordinary mind and said, well, you're being silly. Now back to, the ball's back in their court again. All right, if that's silly, then you've had 6,000 years collectively to identify where you are and how close are you. And of course, the actual objective answer, the best reflection you give them, the objective answer is, well, we still don't know for sure. That's very interesting. Now, and you can say, I'm not being sarcastic. I don't understand perhaps fully the kind of timetables that reality has for this universe, and maybe 6,000 years is, no big deal to reality. I personally, by all best information, I've got another 20 or 30 years here. Now, it's taken them collectively 6,000 to get where they are, that is, of saying, well, we still don't know. All right, so no offense to the rest of you people, you could say, but I believe perhaps I should make, if possible, some extraordinary effort here. Perhaps I should look somewhere else than where I'm looking now. Perhaps I should try and get off the shoulders of pygmies. Perhaps I should try and get off a merry-go-round. Perhaps I should try and find out what might be possible to think. How might you get the nervous system working at this level outside the hands of the collective? Now back to the insanity, as you called it. Well, I didn't mean it personally. Yeah, you say that now. To say that if a person could know where they are, they would have to make up where they are. Yeah, that can't be true. As opposed to us not knowing where we are. Aha. Yes, but we don't know where we are better than we used to. Because 6,000 years ago, people just thought, I'm not sure we know where we are. And they were just barely beginning to talk and be civilized. But now, look at them. Now you have people with tenure, driving Mercedeses, with second and third mortgages, with a summer home. And now they say, yes, Aristotle perhaps didn't know exactly where we are in the universal sense, but, I mean, no offense, they might say to Aristotle, I am sure he must have been a real swell guy. But my goodness, there was no Harvard then. There was no such thing as graduate school. So, I mean, for his day and time, I bet he was a swell fellow. I bet he was sharp as a tack. But hey, 2 PhDs, fellowship. I did work for which I didn't claim credit at Oxford. So, I don't know where we are, I must say, in all due humility. And this man would be speaking for the avant-garde of collective thought. He would say, may I humbly say, I don't know where I am. Greater, better than Aristotle. What's the alternative? The alternative would be, as insane as it is, or may sound, the only way that you could know where you are is you've got to make it up. Tune in next time for, from the University of Alberta, brought to you on PBS here, another lesson, another segment in the continuing educational episode of Sociology from Hell.